It's so nice to see you, and thank you so much for joining me today at the Ask Mama Amy interview. And so, Christine, I've known Christine for a long time now, and I've just really had a lot of respect for her because of the work that she's doing in this world and integrity that she brings to the community and the seniors that she serves, and to be able to allow the community to help our, me as a daughter, I have a senior parent at home, and for people like us to be able to care for our parents in a way that helps them preserve their dignity. And that's why I have Christine here today to share with us, for people who are facing similar dilemmas, like how do you go about and choose somebody to care for your parents? And I want her to tell you all about what she does so you can bring the best to your parents. So let's go ahead and get started. And first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Amy Hsiao, your personal family lawyer. I'm an estate planning attorney, and I help you plan for things so that you can be prepared and maximize and preserve as much wealth as possible for your family while preserving and honoring your wishes. And with that, that's give it over to Christine. And Christine, tell us all about Casa Companion and what it is that it provides and what is your role in it.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for the invitation. Like Amy said, my name is Christine Lee. I'm the owner of Casa Companion Homecare, and we are an independent, family-owned and operated non-medical in-home care agency. And we provide caregivers who offer respite care, personal care, and companionship to support seniors and the disabled all throughout San Diego County. And my family has been fortunate to serve San Diego seniors and their families for going on 8 years now. So we partner with clients and their families by customizing a care plan and a schedule based on the client's needs. And we can assist on an hourly basis, overnight, 24-hour round-the-clock care if that's what's needed. And we can also work with clients who live in assisted living or memory care communities just to provide additional one-on-one support, wherever home may be.
Awesome. And so what, and who needs, you already mentioned this briefly, but I want to kind of pinpoint, what's the demographics like, and who needs in-home care? What are the type of people that you work with, or what's the demographics?
Yeah, so, in-home care can really be for anyone that might need some additional support to live safely and independently at home. So typically our clients are usually seniors that are over 65 years old, and more often than not, they usually have been diagnosed with a condition like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, MS, ALS, or perhaps they have a medical condition like heart disease or diabetes. Many times they could have had a stroke or had a fall or a recent hospitalization or surgery. And so as a result of those things, clients will typically need assistance with activities of daily living, which are things like bathing, dressing, assistance with transferring in and out of a bed or a chair. And we can also provide assistance, even at end of life, where we work in conjunction with hospice and the overall care team to be able to provide, the most comfortable experience at the end of life, both for the client and for their family members. But really, we can also just provide, just day-to-day assistance, just things with what I call like lifestyle assistance, which are things like meal preparation, light housekeeping, medication reminders, running errands or transportation when a client can no longer drive, and just overall companionship.
That's so awesome. And I've talked to several people who have used your services, and the sense that I'm getting from them is that they feel it's very, very personable, and it's just like you're part of their family. And so, I'm really amazed, and I can't wait to hear more about how you're able to do that with all the caregivers that you manage. So what?
That's a big compliment. Thank you for that.
And then you mentioned that oftentimes it's usually when families have a crisis situation, then they need to start thinking about, okay, who can care for my mom and dad? And oftentimes the kids are working and they don't have the time to do that. So how can they go about? And so what is a good time to start thinking about home care arrangements? Of course, the crisis situation, but would you suggest maybe a little earlier than the crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, I want to be able to educate our community on the importance of planning. And obviously, Amy, as an attorney, your focus is on estates and trust, right? So you recognize the significance of planning and what can happen if you don't plan. So I can tell you that when most people think about home care arrangements is after a crisis. So after mom or dad experiences a fall, after an ER visit or a hospitalization, or perhaps like after a mishap due to medication mismanagement. So we hear these stories all the time. They call us inquiring about how we can help after these emergencies occur. And of course, we're there to help. However, what I would love to see more of is the concerned son or daughter that's reaching out well before any type of crisis occurs, because they have an aging parent and they just know that their parents are going to need help down the road, and they want to do their homework now, and to be able to work in conjunction, in partnership with their parent, to be able to like create a blueprint for aging safely in their own home.
Yeah, and in my experience, and Christine just also mentioned, we work with a lot of senior people, and what happens a lot of times is we have to deal with incapacity issues, right? Like when they're in a state where they can't even talk properly or they can't really communicate, then it's very hard for us, for me as an attorney, to be able to document what their wishes are. And I imagine will be the same for the children, to be able to know what their parents' wishes are. And it's way better when they know something might be coming, and when they are still kind of able to talk about it. And that is also a better time for the children to address it with the parents in a peaceful manner. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So that's like the wish list or the goal, right? I mean, like, we want them to be able to plan ahead, but of course it's not always reality. So, life throws curveballs, like, like an unexpected medical diagnosis, or, there's just so many reasons why planning, perhaps didn't happen. Perhaps a parent was resistant to begin with, or they didn't want to accept care, for example. So, planning didn't take place. We want it to, but if it didn't take place ahead of time, but if you start noticing certain things, then it's definitely time to call for more help. So if you start noticing things like self-hygiene and personal care declining, or if you start noticing like an increased safety risks like falls or injuries, or if wandering is taking place, if your parent starts having difficulty just like managing day-to-day tasks like they used to, like they're not paying their bills on time anymore, they're not operating household items, but especially if you are the primary family caregiver and your own health is starting to decline as a result of caregiving, then it's definitely time to call for more help.
For sure, that's the exhaustion that comes from the caregiving, which is very common, I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that despite the fact that people usually come to you, in crisis situation, and we really want people to be able to pre-plan. So one of the things I imagine would take a lot of time is looking at the different home care or the different facilities or the different providers, right?
Yeah.
And that could take quite a while. And so when children are trying to do that, what advice would you give you as they are interviewing all the providers? What to watch out for when they're picking the best home care facility for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's so many options, right? There's a lot of different home care agencies. There's a lot of providers. So first, you want to make sure that the home care agency is licensed by the state of California. So you can ask the agency to see like their proof of license from the state, or you can look them up in the state of California, the Department of Social Services website. They are the governing agency that oversees home care agencies throughout the state. So it's really important, you don't want to work with a company that's operating without a license, that is operating kind of outside of the watchful eye of the state of California. That would be bad. And believe it or not, there are operators out there that work without a license. So stay away from that. But part of being, as our agency, part of being licensed by the Department of Social Services means that, we conduct a thorough background. We do live scan fingerprinting for all of our employees. Our license also requires that all of our employees meet certain training requirements annually and also upon hire. And they're TB tested every couple of years. And in addition, in order to maintain our license, we must be insured. So we carry general liability and commercial insurance. We carry non-owned auto insurance for our caregivers that are driving clients that no longer drive if they need transportation to appointments and errands. And that's very common for seniors. A lot of them don't drive anymore. We also carry a dishonesty bond, which is basically protection against dishonest acts like theft or fraud. And And importantly, all of our caregivers are also our employees, so they're not contractors, they're not independent contractors, and that's an important point because that means that we pay for their payroll taxes, all of the unemployment insurance, and of course workers' comp insurance. And the workers' comp is very important in this line of work, in the type of industry that we work in, because we typically do things that are very difficult on the body, right? So we do things like we help clients transfer from like the bed to a chair. We help reposition clients, from one side to another whenever they're laying in bed, and those can be hard on the body. So it can certainly lead to injury if one isn't careful or if they're not properly trained to do those types of things. And that's why the workers' comp insurance is really important. So, fortunately, we have a really good safety record, and so it's an important thing to ask as you're interviewing potential home care agencies are, of course, if they're licensed or not. And so, for you and your audience as an attorney, that's really important to know because, your goal is to minimize risk, right, and to protect assets. So working with a home care agency does exactly that. It will minimize those types of risks.
And that's exactly what I love what you do so much is and I'm really like surprised to hear, and in fact this is a fact that exists now, is people operating these home care facilities or providing home care without a license. And people
Yeah.
and you mentioned a really good point of how these caregivers are actually all your employees, where I've heard that there are some facilities, in order to cut their costs and make the most profit out of it, they use really cheap care and they just use independent contractor and not do all the due diligence that you've been doing for your employees.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of other things that, if you're shopping around for the best provider, there's other things that you can ask about or that you can find out about. So you want to find out exactly like how they screen and hire their caregivers. How do they determine what's going to be the best match for their mom or dad? So, this is especially important to me because, my background is in HR and I have a recruiting and a staffing background. So, it's so key to be able to do the work up front to, there's matchmaking involved. So you want to make sure that a caregiver that we place in a client's home is going to be a good match. And that's important because of consistency and continuity of care. Because if that consistency isn't there, it's just not good for an elderly client, especially one that has like cognitive or memory impairment issues. So,
and there's a lot of, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just thought that there's just such a high level of trust, because when you send that caregiver out there to take care of the senior, you don't really know what's going on there, right? So the high level of integrity and trust is so important. And so how do you ensure that this person is actually doing the best job that they can? What is the mechanism, or how can people go about and ask for that when they're doing their interview?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just because they are, our employees, we are able to supervise them, right? We're supervising the care and the management of the care and the management of the employee. If they were independent contractors, we wouldn't have supervision of that. So we are, we're doing frequent home visits. We follow up with employees and the clients and the family members often. And so that could be like how that could be another question for home care agencies when you're shopping around, or when you're prospectively shopping around for a new home care agency, is like how are they managing or how are they supervising that care? And you also want to find out just like how the employees are and what's the general culture of the company. Are employees happy working there? Because that essentially will translate over in terms of to the type of care that they're receiving. So in general, turnover is really high in the home care industry, but I think some of that can be mitigated by like good employee relations and by a positive company culture.
That is awesome. And by way of, because the employee can be more open as well with you as the director, then more information is transparent and honest, and then it's just better for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. And so I'm sure like people are curious then, like if they're getting this personalized care, how much does it cost?
Yeah, so it's the cost of home care assistance with a home care agency is about $29 to $30 per hour on average here in San Diego, and that's pretty standard for the market in our region. If you're using a private caregiver, it would be a little bit less. If you're not working through an agency, but then there's a little bit it will be less money. However, you're also losing some of that protection and that risk mitigation that we spoke about earlier. That's so important. But in addition to that, when you're working with an agency, that agency will also have a pool of caregivers to work with in case of a sick call or a vacation, right? So as opposed to if you have a private caregiver and that caregiver calls out, then you don't have any type of backup in place. So typically, just to answer the question, cost is about $29 to $30 per hour. And then, if you compare that, for example, to the cost of moving into a community, into like assisted living, the average assisted living community in San Diego will be about $5,500 a month. And plus extra, maybe like an additional $1,000 to $2,000 per month if there's a care plan that's involved with that. That's for some of the larger communities. A smaller RCFE or boarding care community might be about $5,000 to $6,000 per month, and more than that if it's in an area like La Jolla or some of the more expensive zip codes. And memory care will typically be about $6,000 to $8,000 per month. So if you compare that, to a full-time caregiver assisting at the home, it can be very comparable to those prices, which is good if you want to stay home. However, once around-the-clock care is needed, home care becomes really expensive, and it's more in line with the cost of, like a nursing home, like a private room nursing home. So it's really, and that's not typically financially possible for a lot of people. So that's where it becomes really important to plan, financially and legally, if staying in place at home is the goal. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, and it sounds like most people's wishes are to be able to stay at home if they can. But and
That's
one
right.
and I'll just put in a plug here. Most people think that they will be able to stay at home. And these people are like people who are hardworking. They've worked so hard throughout their lives, and they think they can just stay at home when they age. But unfortunately, in the type of work that we deal with, unfortunately, a lot of the times, and as Christine just shared, it can be very, very costly. And $5,000 is cheap, consider, in the wide range of things. And we've heard like $24,000 in the facility, up to $24,000 is a month. It's not a year, right? And so it can get really costly very quick. And most people cannot afford to throw that $5,000 a month or like the $24,000 a month. And so that's why it's so important to be pre-planning. And with adequate planning, whether you have long-term insurance on the financial side or whether you pre-plan with trust and estate, trust planning, then there are strategies, legal strategies for you to be able to qualify for certain, basically to strategically arrange your assets in a way that will maximize all your financial resources for you to be able to honor your wishes. And so that's one thing I'm sure Christine sees a lot in the work that you do or in the people that you deal with. How many people, I'm curious, actually do go to you and they already have a plan in place?
Oh gosh, it's such a mixed bag. It's always a sigh of relief whenever they do. I mean, sometimes we're getting phone calls from sons or daughters, and they don't even have power of attorney for healthcare or for finances, and so they don't even have the ability to be making these decisions for their parents. And so that's why it's so important to start having these conversations early on, before a crisis, right, about what the wishes are. Just creating these conversations with parents about how they want to age, where they want to age, how they can help support that. Because once, as kids, as sons or daughters, once we know the answers to those questions, then we can really guide them in the right direction towards the path of planning, and really honoring their wishes, just like you said. And not only that, but it takes the burden off of us as caregivers, because there are going to be times when we're going to have to make difficult decisions, right? But if we're making these difficult decisions based on their wishes and what their plans were, it's much easier. The burden is off of us because we're not doubting ourselves on whether or not we made the right decisions. We're following their path. We're following what it is that they want. So absolutely, the pre-planning is key, and that's why working with you is. Or an estate attorney, it just needs to happen beforehand. And that's why I love referring our clients over to you, and obviously just because I've seen the work that you do, Amy, with our clients. I mean, you've done my family's own estate plan, and so I can recommend you wholeheartedly, and you've been great to work with.
Oh, thank you, Christine. And you reminded me of something that happened a while back. Was it, because when the seniors are in a whether they're with a caregiver or a home care facility or whatnot, it's easy to form a bond with the person caring for them. And when
Right.
the children are not around, it's very easy for undue influence in that situation, right? And it's very careful. And I remember one time, and Christine was, and you were so aware of it, of the importance of the home care facility, because when we were executing power of attorneys to allow the senior to designate someone else to make the legal and financial decisions for them, it's very risky for the home care person or the caregiver to be the one being designated, because and
Right.
there are certain formalities or legal requirements that have to be met,
Right.
including independent witnesses, that has to be met. So that legal requirement has to be met for this power of attorney to be valid. And we'll set a different webinar for that, but I just wanted to mention that,
Yeah.
Christine, and that's another question. If you're watching this video, you want to really be careful about those type of requirements. Just because your mom and dad executed a power of attorney and designating the caregiver doesn't mean that it's valid. And in fact, a lot of
Right.
times it might be you might be subject to a lawsuit. That could be a whole can of worms. So I just want to be really, really careful, and working with somebody who understands the importance of that and the implications of how to, and just the importance of doing things right. And so I want
That's
to,
right.
you just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
So does Casa Companion help people? We talked about how much of a financial burden it can be, and so how
Mhm.
important it is to pre-plan. But if people don't pre-plan and if they need the resources or the government benefits, do you help people with that, or do you guide people on how to go about doing that?
Right. So we do not, that's not part of our service to assist, to offer the service in terms of helping people get government services. We can refer to individuals or companies that do that. And there are, you mentioned government services, there are government programs in place. So for example, in our county in San Diego, there's in-home supportive services, which helps individuals who are on SSI or who are low income, to help them subsidize an aid to assist in the home. However, there are eligibility requirements to that. There's income limitations, so not everyone qualifies. You essentially have to be low income in order to qualify for that. So for the mass, for the a good majority of us, home care and senior living in general is paid for out of pocket. So unless you plan ahead and you have paid for long-term care insurance to help with the cost of care, perhaps you're a veteran, and so there's some veterans programs that can assist as well with home care, senior living. So that's where the planning ahead really, it's important, because I think it is, you know this as well as I do, it's a misconception that things like Medicare are going to pay for things, or SSI is going to help pay for these things. It's a big misconception, when really the truth is that it's paid, long-term care, aging is paid for out of pocket, you
Correct.
know.
That's one of the biggest conceptions I have heard out there. They just think, people just think, oh, Medicare will pay for everything, but no, it does not pay for long-term care. So surprise.
Right, right. It is. I mean, there's a lot of education that needs to be done. I mean, we get a lot of phone calls again, when they say, okay, well, how much does this cost? And doesn't insurance pay for this? Or my mom or dad has Medicare, won't that pay for it? And so it's even educating on things like, what's the difference between home care, non-medical home care versus home health, which Medicare does pay for, but that's temporary, it's short visits. It's not going to pay for them to get the assistance at home. It's going to pay for rehab at home. Those types of things. So there's just a lot of education that needs to be done. But unfortunately, people learn along the way where they're in the middle of the crisis, when
Mm,
pre-planning could have really helped.
right, right. And so to wrap up the session, with aging parents, it's sometimes really, really hard to even begin that conversation, right? Because what I have seen in my practice, at least, is that people don't like to say, people don't like to think of themselves as being elderly, right? Or or
That's right.
incapacitated in any way.
Yeah.
Like, of course, they can
Yeah.
manage all of their finances and all of their health decisions. So as the adult children, what would your advice be for the adult children to talk to their senior parents about planning, or maybe even in a soft way? Hey, mom and dad, maybe we can start looking at, interviewing, or what sort of advice would you give?
Right. Well, I think it would just, I probably wouldn't start with, hey, let's start interviewing home care agencies, because they'll probably, right off the bat be resistant to that, because they're probably resistant to care. I would start off the conversation with asking, some questions, like some investigative questions on, like, okay, so mom, where do you want to age? Is your goal to be able to stay at home? Where do you want to age? How it is that you want to age? Do you want to age in place? Just asking those types of questions that are more softer questions, right? Just kind of overall, that will lead them towards, the path to planning. Because if their answer is yes, I want to be able to age in place at home, I want to die here in my own home. Okay, well, there's steps that need to happen in order to make that happen for you. If that is your wish, I will help support you in that wish. But then let's take these steps to be able to do that. So I would just start off with a question of, just start talking to them, just those conversation starters, to find out how it is that they want to age in place. And then from there, just take it, hopefully, just, even if it's baby steps, just little steps to be able to get them to whatever it is their wish or their goal is.
With the whole goal of really preserving the dignity and honoring their wishes as much as possible.
Right, exactly. And again, these are going to be, if we do it right, then these will be their decisions, and all we're doing is honoring it. We're not going to doubt ourselves by making decisions that they didn't want, or you're not sure if this is what they would have wanted or not. We as kids are not making that decision anymore. All we're doing is just following their plan.
Yeah, and as an estate planning attorney, I have to say, just as the parents, even just doing that and talking about it, allowing the children to have the peace of mind, knowing what exactly the parents' wishes are, is such a gift, right? It really is a legacy, such a gift, so that the children don't have to be burdened, like you said, to that emotional burden. Nobody wants to be in that place to make that decision. So.
Yeah. And I think and like you said, it's like that's the emotional crux of a lot of caregivers, is they're constantly feeling like, am I doing enough? Did I make the right decision? Is this what my mom or dad would have wanted? Because we're guessing, so let's take the guesswork out of it and plan ahead.
Yeah, and the intangible, it's just as important as the financial, right? The emotional burden, even though you can't really quantify it, but it's costing so much internally that it's affecting perhaps the quality of care as well, and maybe the attitude as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, awesome. Any last advice you want to give to our audience here before we conclude, Christine?
Yeah, I think it would be important just to touch upon, we're living in the time of COVID, right? So it's hard to ignore that right now. And because we are talking about senior parents, and it's just affected so many things in our lives, right, for everybody, but it's been especially hard for seniors. So I heard a colleague of mine recently just say that we're experiencing a touch famine, and it was such a, gosh, I felt it was such a vivid and descriptive term and phrase that I know. I mean, it's so accurate, and it's true. We're not touching each other like we used to. We're not hugging each other like we used to, and so we're all kind of feeling the weight of that. But it's been especially true for our elderly folks, because they're not getting visits from us anymore, or as often. They're not getting visits from friends or loved ones like they used to. They're lonelier, they're more isolated, and that can be really damaging to a senior, especially one that has like any type of cognitive impairment or anything like that. So to have a companion to still have stimulating conversation with, to do activities with, all of those things, it's really important right now. So just I just wanted to close it off with, it's hard to ignore the time that we're living in right now. So it's just, check in on parents, check in on our elderly folks, get a companion for them. I've just seen a lot of different things, just a lot of decline in a lot of our seniors, especially the ones that are living in communities, even the ones that are home. It's been sad lately for a lot of senior folks.
Yeah, I've heard of this grandpad that people can get. So you can get one of those grandpads, and then it's much bigger font, right? And then you can still climb or see your families and for us.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you just got to get creative. You know, a lot of our caregivers have been setting up Zoom. You know, a lot of our senior folks aren't very technically, you know, oriented, so they've been setting up Zoom meetings with their families and things like that. But there are, I mean, it's just a matter of just trying to keep some sort of connection. You know.
Yeah, and just keeping
Yeah.
sending the love and the
Yeah.
care.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Christine, and we'll be following up this video with some more detailed information. If you have more questions for Christine, I'll post her contact info at the link down below so you can call her directly if you have any more questions. With that, thank you so much and thank you, Christine, for joining us today. Thank you for watching this week's Ask Mama Amy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.